Hey, thanks for watching, folks. Please subscribe to my newsletter if you want free early access to these reviews, along with my more personal thoughts on the book, as well as access to discount codes on my RPG supplements and free downloads. Visit thaumavoir.com and sign up at the bottom. Delta Green is a standalone RPG by Arc Dream Publishing. The core books were released in 2018 as two books, The Agent's Handbook and Handler's Guide. The rules are based on the long-standing Call of Cthulhu RPG, as it started out in 1997 as a source book for Call of Cthulhu. The Delta Green RPG was nominated in 2018 by the ENnie Awards for Best Game, as well as Best Rules, won a Silver ENnie for Product of the Year and a Gold ENnie for Best Production Values. In this video, I'm only reviewing the Handler's Guide, which is basically Delta Green's Game Master's Guide. For game mechanics and character creation, check out my video reviewing the Agent's Handbook. Just as a quick note, the themes of insanity and horror in this book are about as heavy as it gets in an RPG. Not everyone will find mental illness and psychological torment to be their idea of fun. Another quick note, the original idea for this game was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's short story The Shadow over Innsmouth. At the start of the story, there is a description of the U.S. federal government raiding a small Massachusetts coastal town and eradicating or imprisoning its population, which was infected by supernatural creatures from the deep. The idea in Delta Green is, what if that incident gave birth to a secret quasi-military, quasi-intelligence agency that persisted within the US government to this day? The authors start a detailed timeline of Delta Green with the federal government's raid on Innsmouth in the 1920s. That triggers a decades-long struggle against the Deep Ones, but that struggle is really just the tip of the iceberg. The extraordinary detail of the history spans for about 125 pages in this 370-page book. Sprinkled generously throughout are flavor text layouts styled like secret intelligence files and notes. These faux intelligence files are written pretty convincingly, at least for a tabletop RPG, and can easily be printed out or photocopied to be handed to agents at the table as mission hooks or clues to further along a game session. The history starts with Innsmouth, but quickly expands outward to incorporate supernatural themes and elements from Lovecraft's other stories, as if they happened along a single timeline. You would be well rewarded if you've already read all of Lovecraft's stories. There are countless occult and supernatural mysteries sprinkled over the almost 100-year history, incorporating everything from Lovecraft's works, as well as third-party Cthulhu mythos contributors like Robert E. Howard and others. All the remaining nooks and crannies are packed with details from America's rich history of secret government programs. Even Roswell-style aliens are brought into the fold in a surprising way that I won't spoil here. The Agent's Handbook, this game's player's guide, is thematically set in the modern era and has very little to equip players for an early or mid-20th century setting. Of course, with a little adaptation from the player side, it could be done. Accepting that small burden, this book essentially offers a different flavor of its setting for each of 9 decades, with a detailed history of each to back it up. That being said, a good chunk of the history section, as well as much of the rest of the Handler's Guide, really does focus on the modern era. The history ends in 2017, leaving you with a century-sized mountain of supernatural events, a string of dead cults, and countless buried civilizations. This is the fertile soil your agents get dropped into, and where the unnatural things thrive. The book lumps effects by both rituals and objects into a concept called hypergeometry, loosely associating all these magics with mathematics and shapes. This is undoubtedly derived from Lovecraft's frequent use of the term non-Euclidean, which only shows up in this book once. Anyway, hypergeometry costs willpower points and sanity, sometimes also power points and hit points, which means your players are not going to be spamming spells in this game, at least not for very long. Between spells and rituals, the rituals are much more involved. Agents use up sanity and time just to learn one. Effects from both can run the gamut from attacks, healing, and enhanced movement to scrying and summoning. All of the listed rituals are detailed pretty decently, and there's nothing stopping a handler from making up new hypergeometries. Although the authors meticulously line out the Lovecraftian bestiary on a timeline that starts 4.48 billion years ago, it's not a logical universe. What it actually is a smorgasbord derived out of a bunch of short stories. But fortunately for everyone who's a fan, as well as a handler trying to put a campaign together, the nature of time and space is liquid in the Lovecraft universe. As far as the monsters go, there are 33 so-called unnatural entities and 15 great old ones. The smaller, more manageable entities are a who's who of the mythos, ranging from the colors out of space to shoggoths and great white apes. The details are great, and the 15 great old ones, gods from the expanded Lovecraftian universe, are also detailed in satisfying detail. But I couldn't help but notice a pretty major omission from this whole section of the book that contains 48 fantastical beasts and gods. Only a fraction of them are illustrated. To be fair, the images that are in the book are great, sometimes actually incredible. The credits list the head writer, Dennis Detweiler, as the sole illustrator, so that is doubly impressive. But the dozens of pages of creepy descriptions definitely left me wanting more depictions, especially of some of the more obscure creatures listed, like the Leogor-controlled quasi-dinosaurian constructs. The great old ones, as you might expect, are not really creatures that an agent can face off with and defeat very easily. But even the great Azathoth can be dismissed by ritual, and almost all of them can be discorporated or blown up. Agents just need to land that big fat lethality roll on them. For the most part, the gods are just 15 different flavors of death and madness. There are also 4 very fun pages on guiding the handler on how to make their own horrible little Lovecraftian monstrosity as well. The book gets around to describing how the primary Delta Green, known as the program, is actually organized and managed. It's got about 1,000 employees, with dozens of black sites around the world that contain labs and detainment facilities, as well as a headquarters. Headquarters moves every few years and is located at the handler's discretion. It can be a wing of an existing military base or a nondescript office building in the middle of the city or whatever. There are 6 departments broken down into bureaucratic silos. Each of these departments is led by a named, statted NPC with full backstories, which suggests that the authors want your agents to maybe have some indirect or direct contact with them at some point. Recruitment of new Delta Green agents is done in a multi-step process. 1. Exposure. Usually the recruit is found having already been exposed to the unnatural event or entity. 2. Response. They assess the recruit's response to the event to gauge whether or not they would be suitable for service. This is a moot point in the game since players at the table want to play as agents and roll some dice, so they're going to be inducted into Delta Green regardless of their character's response to the unnatural. 3. Investigation. The program will check into the background of the recruit. This is also kind of moot at the table. And 4. Briefing. This would actually happen at the table, where the handler has the recruit meet them somewhere and get read into the program by a Delta Green NPC, a case handler who could be in the form of a high-ranking Marine officer or a CDC field director or some other stern, intimidating government figure. Games of Delta Green are called operations, which can last 1 or multiple sessions. In game time, an operation rarely lasts more than a few weeks. In the course of an operation, agents slowly uncover the true nature of something unnatural while trying to hold on to their sanity points and maintain their bonds and their day job. The book offers a structured approach to launching an operation, including having a case officer for the agents at the table, cover stories for their day jobs, and starting clues that come in the form of evidentiary paperwork or interviews with NPCs. The program is, and has always been, extremely paranoid about secrecy. This means that the handler is asked to be on the lookout for any sort of compromise by the agents of Delta Green as an organization or any part of its mission. A security breach during an operation can spiral out of control for agents, since they don't have a neuralizer that can zap away witness memories. That being said, there is a window of opportunity for weird and sci-fi tech for handlers to leak to agents. The idea is that Delta Green has been conducting research on all those Lovecraftian monsters and occurrences over the years, providing a sort of sandbox for handlers to play with. Gate technology, ESP, superspatial intelligence, hypergeometry, reanimation of dead organisms, etc. When Delta Green reformed with a vengeance in 2002, a contingent of former agents put together their own Delta Green. While the ultra-secret, illegally funded but official Delta Green called itself the program, now there was the ad hoc old guard Delta Green that called itself the Outlaws. There's a whole section on how this other shrinking, ever more paranoid cousin of Delta Green called the Outlaws operates. It mirrors the program in many ways, but is severely understaffed, underfunded, and over-compartmentalized. The book lists certain elements that should be in any game of Delta Green. These are some very broad strokes. Fortunately, the book also breaks down step by step the way to run a game with 9 distinct stages to a game. If you want a lot of heavy lifting done for you, you can pick up a professionally written Delta Green adventure kit. I had the fortune of reading through one of them, Control Group, published in 2019. Control Group contains 4 unique scenarios, and they are all very self-contained and focused. For example, the first operation has a very specific set of pre-gen characters for characters to play, namely fictitious American astronauts in 2010. They are not Delta Green agents, but rather volunteers asked to escort 2 unfit NPCs who are Delta Green data analysts into high orbit in order to fix a top secret defense satellite that is imbued with dark powers. You are provided with every roleplay possibility every step of the way, even down to where everyone sits on the shuttle at liftoff. Other scenarios are equally as thorough and well-researched, involving in turn US soldiers having to visit a dark and forgotten corner of Afghanistan in 2011, CDC agents responding to a strange outbreak in rural Arizona, and veteran Delta Green agents looking into a small Kansas cult that has bitten off more than it can chew. Control Group is a great book to hop to next if you've gotten through the Handler's Guide and are a bit overwhelmed with how to prep a game. I'd wager that if you ran all 4 operations out of this book, you'd be an old hand and would be more than ready to start generating your own interactive Delta Green nightmares for the table. From a handler's perspective, this game does seem pretty intense and dark. Since it originally came out as a Call of Cthulhu supplement before the X-Files debuted in the early 90s, I'm reluctant to say that this feels like an X-Files RPG with federal agents slowly uncovering the supernatural. All things considered, Delta Green is a lot darker and more frightening. Links for everything are below. Thanks for watching. This is Dave signing off. See ya.